Hey, I'm Shade Tree Pastor, and today we're going to be taking a closer look at so-called biblical marriage. Also, just a real quick caveat, still got a crazy kitten running around behind me, so you may hear her getting into trouble. Please ignore it. I'm just going to let her do her thing. All right, let's talk about this for a second. One of the things that comes up for me a lot is the idea of so-called biblical marriage. Especially in light of some of the conversations I've been having recently after the last election. I've had a lot of people, especially on the right, trying to say that that side better represents Christianity than the left. Now, that whole argument is something I'm not going to deal with today, but one of the things they often point to demonstrate that the right is closer to biblical values and Christian faith is the idea of marriage. Because the left in general supports gay marriage, many conservative Christians will make the claim that this goes against the idea of biblical marriage, which they define as being between one man and one woman. Is that true? Well, as we're going to find out, if we actually look at Scripture, and if we let Scripture speak for itself, in other words, if we don't try to apply our own morals and values and opinions onto Scripture, we are going to find that that is not exactly true. What we instead are going to find is that the Bible itself offers several different views on marriage and what marriage can and should be. Therefore, there is no one biblical view of marriage. Now, I have not done an exhaustive study of this, so I am going to say only that there are at least 3 different views on marriage given in Scripture. There may be more. There may be more than that, or there may be a few that are not as well supported, but still the Bible might touch on. But the 3 main ones that are very obvious to see in Scripture are these. The first is that idea of rather than biblical, let's call it traditional in regards to our American values anyway, traditional marriage. And that is marriage between one man and one woman. That is, for example, what we see in Genesis chapter 2. When Adam and Eve are joined together by God in marriage, it says at the end of chapter 2, "Therefore, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and they will become one flesh." Now, there's a lot we could dig into in that verse about what it says about the marital relationship, but suffice it to say, it definitely does seem to describe marriage as being between one man and one woman, in this case, Adam and Eve. The question we have to ask ourselves is that proscriptive? What that means is, does it forbid other kinds of marriage or show other kinds of marriage as being invalid? And I think it is clear, again, when you just let Scripture speak for itself, that it is not. That it is merely descriptive. It is describing the marriage and the marital relationship that was taking place between Adam and Eve, and that would take place between one man and one woman anytime they kind of did get married. But we can know that that does not proscribe other kinds of marriage, because there is at least one other kind of marriage that is condoned in Scripture, and that is polygamy. Not one man and one woman, but one man and many women. And we see this over and over again in the Old Testament especially. We see it with the patriarchs. We see it with all the kings of Israel, for example. And while we don't see it a lot among the common people, that's for a very simple reason, because it was expensive. And the common people couldn't often afford that. That really was a marital choice for the rich and the wealthy. Now, I don't know about you, but I have come out of a very conservative evangelical background. And I know that when I thought about this in the past and wasn't letting Scripture just speak for itself, I kind of rationalized this in my head by saying, well, God didn't really approve of it, but He allowed it. Maybe you're thinking the same thing. Maybe that's how you want to explain away those multiple examples of polygamy in the Old Testament. But I will tell you that really doesn't hold any water. It doesn't hold any water because actually God never once condemns it. Never once condemns it anywhere in the Old Testament. In fact, if you go to Deuteronomy chapter 25, there is a section of the law that is meant to provide for widows. And in that provision, it says that if that widow is a part of a family and has no children, the brother of her deceased husband is to take her as his wife. Makes no distinction whether he's married or not, makes no distinction whether he has his own family unit or not. He is commanded to take his deceased brother's wife as his own, to get children by her so that his brother's family line can continue and so that she can be provided for by her children in her old age. So not only does God nowhere condemn polygamy, He actually commands it in a few places. But even that isn't the only view of marriage we get, because we get another really interesting view of marriage in the New Testament from the Apostle Paul, which is that you really shouldn't get married at all. And this is probably something that he got from Jesus, who described heaven as being like the angels, where we will neither marry nor be given in marriage. And then in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, the Apostle Paul talks about how it is better to not marry. It is better to remain celibate. It is better to remain single. Now, he does make some allowances for people that cannot control their sexual urges, that if that's the case, it's still better to get married. But he makes the point that if you can bear it, it's better to stay single. It's better to not get married at all. So really, there we have at least three views of marriage. That it is between one man and one woman, that it is polygamous between one man and many women, or that we shouldn't be doing it at all if you can stand it. Now, that doesn't speak specifically to the idea of gay marriage that is an issue for so many people on the right, but it does teach us that people should stop saying that it is wrong because the Bible clearly teaches that marriage is between one man and one woman, because that simply isn't true. It's not what the Bible teaches.